Hi, so this is another example of of a div element here with a position relative. Uh, this div element having another element inside it, and this element has a position absolute, and this absolute position in relation to this other element which is relative. So now let us look at another property, a very important property and very widely used in CSS, which is float. And the float property specifies whether or not an element should float. So here in the first example, you'll find that elements can be pushed to the left or right using the float property. So here you have the box which is floating right, and the text around it flows to the left. And here in the second example, the elements with float will position themselves horizontally if there is room, and then move to the next line. Okay. So this is about CSS float. Let us look at some examples of these. So so here again you have the same example we've been using before, the div before, div after, and the other divisions over here, div 1, 1, and within div 1 there is div 1a, 1b, and here there's div 1c. So for variable height columns, absolute positioning does not work. So we were looking at absolute positioning in this early example, where the column had where there was a fixed height specified over here to division 1. So now we're trying to look for a solution with a variable height columns. So we can float an element to push it as far as possible to the right or to the left, and allow text to wrap around it. And this is typically used for images, but we can use it for more complex layout tasks. Okay, so here there is division 1a, and here it is specified to float to the left. So that's one use of float shown in this example. In this second example, that float is used with two columns. So if you float one column to the left, then also float the second column to the left, they will push up against each other. So here you have your div 1a, and we specified it to float to the left. And then for div 1b again, we specified it to float to the left. So both of these now will float to the left. So there is something else which we can use along with float, and that is the clear property. And this clear property is used to control the behavior of floating elements. So if you want an element to not allow anything to float next to it, that's when you use the clear property. So when we have clear left, it doesn't allow elements, it doesn't allow floating items to the left. Clear right doesn't allow floating items to the right. And clear both doesn't allow floating items either to the left or to the right. So if you use clear on an element, it will move down the page until the clear condition is met. So let's look at an example again. So after the floating elements, we can clear the floats to push down the rest of the content. So here what happened was that we were using float, but the rest of the content was still up there, so it was not displaying properly. So after having used this float, if we use clear, then the rest of the content will then flow properly. So we say, okay, for division 1a, the div 1a, we'll say, okay, float left, and then for div 1b, we say float right. So they both display together like this, where you're with the second column, the column is pushing up against the first column. And then we say that for div 1c, we say clear both. So that is when it will come down and display as it normally would.